Snow wasn't even in the forecast. At least, not the kind that erased roads, swallowed cars, and made the world disappear for 2 straight weeks. If someone had told me that morning I'd end up trapped in a remote mountain cabin with a man I'd only known for a few hours, I would have laughed, grabbed another coffee, and driven home. Instead, I kept driving higher into the mountains. My name is Zachary. I'm 28, work remotely as a graphic designer, and I'd rented the cabin because I desperately needed silence. The previous 6 months had been a parade of deadlines, endless video meetings, and a breakup that had somehow hurt more because it ended politely. No screaming. No betrayal. Just, I think we're holding each other back. Those words echoed in my head every time my apartment felt too quiet. So I booked an isolated cabin for 10 days. No neighbors. No reception unless I climbed halfway up the hill. Just snow-covered pine trees, a fireplace, and enough groceries to avoid civilization. Or so I thought. About 30 minutes before reaching the cabin, I noticed another SUV parked on the side of the narrow mountain road. Its hood was open. A man stood beside it, rubbing his hands together while staring into the engine compartment like pure determination might fix whatever had broken. I slowed. Normally I would have kept driving. I wasn't exactly qualified to help anyone with a car. But there wasn't another vehicle for miles. I rolled down my window. "You okay?" He looked over. Tall. Dark blonde hair hidden beneath a knit beanie. Heavy winter jacket zipped to his chin. Maybe around my age. He smiled, though it looked more tired than optimistic. "Depends how you define okay." I parked. "What's wrong?" "No idea," he admitted. "Engine died about 20 minutes ago." "You call anyone?" He held up his phone. "No signal." "Of course." I climbed out, immediately regretting leaving the warmth of my car. The wind cut straight through my coat. "I'm Zachary." "Nathan." We shook hands quickly before both stuffing them back into our pockets. I leaned over the engine as if I knew what I was looking at. I didn't. Nathan noticed. "You don't know anything about cars either?" "Not even a little." He laughed. "Well, at least we're honest." That was the first thing I liked about him. Not his face, though he was undeniably attractive. Not his voice. His honesty. Most people would have pretended. He simply accepted reality. We spent 10 pointless minutes staring into the engine before finally admitting defeat. "So," I said. "So. Where were you headed?" He pointed farther up the mountain. "Same rental cabin area." I frowned. "Which cabin?" He pulled out his reservation email. I looked at the address. Then blinked. "No way." "What?" I showed him mine. "Same address." Nathan stared. Then looked at me. Then back at the email. "I think," he said slowly, "someone seriously messed up." Apparently they had. The rental company had somehow double-booked the property. Normally that would have meant one of us finding another place. Except there wasn't another place. The nearest town was over an hour away. The road behind us was already disappearing beneath fresh snow. And there was still no phone signal. "Guess we should at least get there first," I said. Nathan nodded. "I'll come with you. We can figure it out once we're inside." He locked his dead SUV, grabbed one backpack, and climbed into my passenger seat. For the first few minutes, neither of us talked much. Not awkwardly. More like two strangers trying to decide what kind of person the other one was. Nathan broke the silence first. "So, vacation?" "Sort of." "Escaping life?" I glanced at him. "Is it that obvious?" He smiled. "I booked a cabin in the middle of nowhere." "Fair point." "What about you?" He looked out the window. "My sister told me I work too much." "So you listened?" "I got tired of hearing about it." That made me laugh. The snowfall grew heavier. The trees became white walls. Visibility dropped. By the time we reached the cabin, snowflakes were flying sideways. The place looked exactly like the pictures online. Small wooden cabin. Steep roof. Stone chimney already dusted white. Surrounded by endless forest. Beautiful. Lonely. We unloaded our bags as quickly as possible. The second we stepped inside, warm air wrapped around us. Nathan let out a relieved sigh. Oh, thank God. The cabin wasn't huge. One living room. Kitchen. Bathroom. One bedroom. One bed. We both noticed it at exactly the same moment. Either of us spoke. Nathan looked back toward the living room. There has to be a sofa. There was. A reasonably comfortable one. He smiled. Problem solved. I appreciated that. No awkward discussion. No weirdness. Just practical. We checked every cupboard. Firewood. Blankets. Board games. Emergency lanterns. Enough canned food for several days. My groceries filled the rest of the kitchen. Nathan unpacked his own supplies. Between us, we'd accidentally stocked the place for almost 3 weeks. Well, he said, at least we won't starve. Outside, the wind slammed against the windows. It had become impossible to see more than a few feet beyond the porch. Snow piled up frighteningly fast. Nathan stepped outside for barely 30 seconds before rushing back in. It's getting bad. How bad? He brushed snow off his shoulders. I couldn't even see your car. We both looked through the front window. He was right. My SUV had almost disappeared beneath drifting snow. Something about that made my stomach tighten. The cabin suddenly felt much farther from civilization than it had an hour earlier. Nathan seemed to feel it too. So, I guess we're roommates. For tonight. Neither of us realized how wrong those last 2 words would turn out to be. That evening felt surprisingly normal. We cooked together mostly because neither of us wanted to admit we hated cooking alone. Nathan turned out to be far better in the kitchen than I was. You cut vegetables like you're afraid of them. I am. They're carrots. They're judgmental carrots. He laughed harder than the joke deserved. I realized I'd missed making someone laugh. Not flirting. Not dating. Just easy conversation. After dinner we played cards because there wasn't much else to do. Nathan won almost every round. You've definitely hustled people before. My grandmother. That's somehow worse. He grinned. She cheated. I don't believe you. You never met my grandmother. The fireplace cracked softly beside us. Outside, the storm grew louder. At around 9, the lights flickered once. Then again. Nathan looked toward the ceiling. Don't. I'm not doing anything. You're thinking about the power going out. I absolutely am. As if the mountain wanted to prove him right. Everything went dark. Complete silence. Then. The emergency battery lights switched on automatically, filling the cabin with a warm amber glow. Nathan exhaled. Okay. Still alive? Barely. We both laughed. The laughter faded more quickly than before. The storm wasn't stopping. If anything, it sounded stronger. Nathan walked to the front door and opened it only a crack. Snow immediately blew inside. He shut it again. That's not good. How deep? He looked at me. I think we're buried. Neither of us slept particularly well that night. Not because of each other. Because every few hours the wind shook the cabin hard enough to wake us. Around 6 in the morning, I heard Nathan moving around the kitchen. I joined him. He was staring silently out the window. I followed his gaze. Nothing. Just white. The porch was completely invisible. The snow had reached halfway up the windows. Nathan spoke without looking away. I think we're officially stuck. I tried opening the front door. It moved maybe 3 inches before hitting packed snow. My chest tightened. For the first time, the situation stopped feeling unusual. And started feeling real. Neither of us knew it yet, but the mountain had just made the decision for us. We weren't sharing a cabin for one night. We were about to spend the next 2 weeks completely cut off from the rest of the world. The first thing Nathan did was try the radio. The cabin had an old emergency weather receiver sitting on a shelf near the fireplace. It looked like it had survived at least 3 decades of winters. He twisted the dial. Static. More static. Then, finally, a voice broke through. Winter storm warning remains in effect, multiple roads closed, avalanche risk, travel impossible. The signal faded again. Nathan looked at me. Well. Neither of us needed to say it. Nobody was coming today. Or tomorrow. I checked my phone out of habit. No signal. Nathan did the same. Nothing. He slipped it back into his pocket without saying a word. For the next hour we focused on practical things because practical things were easier than thinking. Water. Food. Firewood. Battery lanterns. Blankets. We counted everything. The cabin owner had clearly expected guests to occasionally get snowed in. The pantry already contained emergency supplies. Combined with what Nathan and I had brought, we'd be comfortable for at least 2 weeks if we were careful. Comfortable. The words sounded strange. Trapped wasn't comfortable. Still, it could have been much worse. Around noon, we finally managed to force the front door open by pushing together. A wall of snow waited outside. Nathan stepped out first. Immediately sank almost to his waist. Yeah. What? We're not driving anywhere. I followed him outside. The landscape looked unreal. Yesterday there had been a road. Today there was only an endless white field stretching between buried pine trees. Even my SUV had almost vanished. Only the roof and one side mirror remained visible. Nathan slowly turned in a circle. I've never seen anything like this. Neither had I. It wasn't beautiful anymore. It was overwhelming. The silence felt different too. Snow absorbed sound. The whole mountain seemed muted. Like the outside world had simply stopped existing. We stayed outside for less than 10 minutes before retreating inside, soaked with snow. Nathan hung his jacket near the fireplace. I vote we don't do that again unless we have to. Seconded. He looked toward the window. So. I guess today's agenda is. He looked around the cabin. Not losing our minds. That became our unofficial goal. We cleaned the kitchen. Organized supplies. Moved extra firewood indoors. Nathan even found an old puzzle hidden inside a cabinet. 500 pieces. Mountain landscape. I stared at it. You're kidding. He laughed. I think the cabin owner has a sense of humor. By evening we'd completed exactly the border. Nathan leaned back on the floor. This is impossible. We've finished 4%. Don't ruin this for me. He rubbed his eyes. How long do you think we'll actually be here? I hesitated. I don't know. You can lie if it helps. I think, at least several days. He nodded slowly. I figured. The honesty between us came surprisingly easily. Maybe because there was no point pretending. There was no audience. No social expectations. Just 2 strangers sharing an unusual situation. After dinner we talked longer. Not about the storm. About life before it. Nathan worked as an architect. Mostly commercial buildings. I spend my days designing places I'll probably never visit. Do you like it? He considered the question. I like creating things. But I forgot how to stop working. I smiled. My therapist said almost exactly the same thing. You have a therapist? I did. What happened? I started feeling better. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Or convince yourself you didn't need one anymore? You sound like her. My sister says the same thing. I laughed. I liked your sister already. He smiled quietly. She's usually right. There was a pause. Not uncomfortable. Just thoughtful. What about you? He asked. The breakup? I looked into the fire. You mentioned escaping. I hadn't expected to tell him. Yet somehow, it felt easier talking to someone I'd met yesterday than to people I'd known for years. 3 years together. Nathan nodded silently. We didn't fight. Sometimes that's worse. Exactly. I poked another log into the fire. We just stopped making each other happy. He didn't interrupt. Didn't offer advice. Just listened. It's strange, I continued. I kept waiting for someone to be the bad guy. There wasn't one. No. Nathan stared into the flames. I think people underestimate how painful that is. I looked at him. You've been through that too. He smiled without humor. Last year. Neither of us spoke for a while. The fire crackled. Wind rattled the windows. Somehow, the silence felt lighter than before. Later that night, while brushing my teeth, I noticed Nathan standing outside on the porch. He'd managed to clear enough snow to step out safely. I joined him. The storm had finally eased. The sky had cleared completely. Thousands of stars covered the mountains. I'd never seen so many. Nathan looked upward. I forgot the sky could look like this. I followed his gaze. No city lights. No airplanes. Nothing. Just stars. It's beautiful. He nodded. Yeah. Another silence. This one different. Comfortable. So, Nathan said eventually, I know this sounds ridiculous. What? I'm actually glad I wasn't stuck here alone. I smiled. Me too. He looked slightly embarrassed after admitting it. I would have talked to myself by now. I already caught myself apologizing to a kettle this morning. He laughed. What did the kettle do? It wasn't its fault. That laugh lingered longer than expected. It echoed across the silent mountain. When we went back inside, something had shifted. Not dramatically. Just enough. The cabin didn't feel like two strangers occupying the same space anymore. It felt shared. The next morning we woke to complete silence. No wind. No snow. Nathan immediately looked hopeful. Maybe. We opened the door together. Hope disappeared. The snow was even deeper. Apparently it had continued overnight. Nathan sighed dramatically. I hate mountains. You voluntarily came here. I've made mistakes. He grabbed a shovel leaning against the porch. We should probably dig around the cabin. For what? So we don't disappear completely. It turned into surprisingly hard work. Every shovelful slid back into place. After nearly 2 hours, we'd managed to clear a narrow path around 3 sides of the cabin. Nathan collapsed onto the porch steps. I'm exhausted. You've moved snow for 2 hours. I've offended snow for 2 hours. I handed him a bottle of water. He accepted it gratefully. You know. What? I don't think I've ever spent this much uninterrupted time with another person. I blinked. Really? Phones. Work. Life. He shrugged. Normally everyone's distracted. He wasn't wrong. Neither of us had looked at a screen in almost 2 days. There wasn't one to look at. No emails. No notifications. No endless scrolling. Just conversation. Real conversation. That afternoon, while reorganizing the bookshelf, I found several old novels. Nathan picked one up. You read? When I remember how. He tossed me another. We should. We're 30. And? This feels like summer camp. He grinned. I miss summer camp. By evening we were sitting in opposite armchairs, reading quietly while snow reflected pale moonlight through the windows. Every so often one of us would laugh at something in a book, or comment on a ridiculous sentence, or recommend a chapter. The silence between us no longer needed filling. That realization surprised me. Usually silence with someone new felt awkward. With Nathan, it didn't. Not anymore. As I got ready for bed that night, I caught myself thinking something unexpected. I wasn't counting the days until I could leave. I was simply wondering what tomorrow would be like. That thought should have worried me. Instead, it made me smile. By the 5th day, we had developed a routine without ever talking about it. Nathan always woke up first. I always made coffee. He checked the fire. I cooked breakfast. Afterward, we'd shovel snow for an hour, not because we believed we'd reach the road, but because doing nothing felt worse. Then we'd read, talk, play cards, work on the impossible 500-piece puzzle that still looked more like scattered blue and white cardboard than an actual mountain. Life had become strangely simple. One morning I caught Nathan humming while washing dishes. What? He looked over. You've been humming the same tune for 10 minutes. I have? You have. I didn't even notice. He smiled to himself. I guess that's a good sign. What is? I'm finally relaxing. The answer stayed with me all day. Because I realized. So was I. Not just physically. Mentally. For the first time in years, my brain wasn't jumping ahead to tomorrow. Or next week. Or the next deadline. There was only today. The cabin. Nathan. The fire. It should have felt boring. Instead, it felt peaceful. That afternoon we decided to explore a little farther from the cabin. Not far. Just enough to stretch our legs. The snow reached almost to our knees despite the packed trail we made. Everything looked untouched. Like we were the only two people left in the world. Nathan stopped beside an enormous pine tree. I wish I could take a picture. You don't have your phone? I do. He pulled it out. Still no signal. Battery at 40%. He looked at the camera app. Then slowly put the phone away again. Actually. What? I don't want one. I frowned. No? He shook his head. I think I'd rather remember it. That answer surprised me. Nathan noticed. What? I expected you to say the opposite. He laughed. I would have. Last week. We kept walking. Our footprints were the only marks in the snow. So, I asked, what changed? He thought about it. I don't know. I think. He looked toward the endless forest. I've spent years trying to document everything. Trips. Projects. Dinners. But I barely remember actually being there. I understood exactly what he meant. You were busy proving it happened. Yeah. He smiled faintly. And somehow I forgot to experience it. We stood quietly for another moment. The mountain didn't need photographs. It demanded attention instead. When we returned to the cabin, our cheeks were red from the cold. Nathan immediately walked toward the fireplace. I've officially become 80 years old. What happened? My favorite activity is warming my hands. I was going to say making soup. That second. I laughed. He looked genuinely pleased he managed to make me laugh. That realization caught me off guard. He'd started paying attention. Not in a romantic way. Just. He noticed things. Like how I always smiled before laughing. Or that I hated mushrooms. Or that I unconsciously tapped my fingers whenever I was thinking. Little things. I noticed things too. Nathan read the last page of every chapter twice. He couldn't sit still while talking. He always thanked me for meals, even when breakfast was just toast. Those tiny observations accumulated without either of us realizing. Until suddenly. They mattered. That evening we found an old notebook in one of the drawers. Apparently previous guests had left messages over the years. Nathan began reading them aloud. Power went out for 3 days. Learned my husband snores louder than the generator. I laughed. Keep going. He turned another page. If you're reading this, don't trust the left kitchen cabinet. Something lives in there. We both looked at the cabinet. Nathan slowly walked over. Opened it. Nothing. Coward. They got me. He kept reading. Some entries were funny. Some romantic. Some simply listed snowfall measurements. Then Nathan stopped. What? He handed me the notebook. One message had been written nearly 15 years earlier. Getting snowed in felt like the worst thing that could happen. Turns out it was exactly what we needed. Sometimes the world forces you to stop because you never would on your own. There were no names. Just that. Nathan quietly sat beside me. I like that. So do I. He stared into the fire for a long moment. I don't think I realized how exhausted I was. Until now? Yeah. He rubbed his eyes. I kept thinking I needed a vacation. What I actually needed, he gestured toward the window, was for the entire world to become unreachable. I smiled. I've been thinking something similar. He looked at me. Does that scare you? What? Going back. I didn't answer immediately. Because I honestly didn't know. Maybe. Nathan nodded. I was afraid you'd say that. You too? Yeah. The silence afterward wasn't uncomfortable. It felt honest. Outside, snow began falling again. Not violently this time. Softly. Almost peacefully. Nathan eventually stood. I'm making hot chocolate. We're adults. Exactly. Adults decide these things. I watched him disappear into the kitchen. A few minutes later he returned with 2 steaming mugs. He handed me one. Taste test. I took a sip. Too much cinnamon. I knew it. So why did you add it? I wanted confirmation. I laughed. You deliberately made bad hot chocolate? For science. I shook my head. You're ridiculous. I've accepted that. The conversation drifted naturally after that. Childhood memories. Embarrassing jobs. Terrible apartments. Nathan confessed he'd once accidentally presented the wrong architectural plans to an entire room full of investors. What happened? They applauded. Before realizing? Before realizing. What did you do? I kept talking for another 3 minutes hoping reality would change. It didn't. No. I laughed so hard my sides hurt. He looked incredibly satisfied with himself. Worth it. It absolutely was. Hours passed without either of us noticing. Around midnight the fire had burned low. Nathan stretched. I should sleep. Probably. Neither of us moved. Finally he stood. Paused. Then looked back at me. You know. What? If my car hadn't broken down. I finished the sentence. We never would have met. He smiled quietly. No. We wouldn't have. There was something in the way he looked at me then. Not romantic. Not yet. Just grateful. I felt exactly the same. The next morning I woke unusually early. The cabin was still dark. Nathan was already outside. I pulled on my coat and joined him. He was standing alone at the edge of the clearing, watching the sunrise. The mountains glowed pink beneath fresh snow. Neither of us spoke. Eventually Nathan broke the silence. I've been thinking. Dangerous. It usually is. He smiled without looking away from the horizon. I don't think this trip happened for the reason I planned. What was the reason? To get away from people. He turned toward me. I think I actually needed one person. The words landed somewhere deep inside me. He didn't seem to realize how personal they'd sounded. Or maybe he did. Either way, neither of us tried to explain them. We simply stood together, watching the sun slowly climb over the mountains. For the first time since arriving, I wasn't wondering when the snow would melt. I was wondering what would happen when it finally did. After that sunrise, something shifted. Not dramatically. Neither of us woke up and suddenly confessed hidden feelings. Nothing like that. It was quieter. We simply stopped behaving like strangers. The change showed up in little moments. Nathan no longer knocked before stepping into the bedroom to ask if I wanted coffee. I no longer apologized every time I borrowed one of his sweaters because mine was still drying near the fireplace. We moved around the cabin without thinking about who owned which space. Somehow, it had become ours. On the 8th day, the weather finally cleared completely. The sky was bright blue. The air sharp enough to sting your lungs. Nathan stood by the window, staring toward the buried road. Think anyone started clearing it? I hope so. He didn't answer. Instead, he continued watching the snow. I noticed something in his expression. You don't sound very convinced. He looked at me. I'm not sure I want them to hurry. The words slipped out before he could stop them. His eyes widened slightly. I didn't mean. I know what you meant. He looked relieved. He rubbed the back of his neck. I forgot how peaceful life could feel. So did I. He smiled faintly. I almost don't trust it. Why? Because eventually real life comes back. That sentence stayed with me for the rest of the day. Real life. It sounded strangely distant. Like it belonged to someone else. That afternoon we finally finished the puzzle. Nathan carefully placed the last piece into the center. There. I stared at it. We did it. He leaned back dramatically. I never want to see another mountain again. You literally came here for mountains. I've changed. We both laughed. Then we just looked at it. 500 pieces. Hours spread across several days. Neither of us wanted to put it back into the box. Nathan eventually reached for his phone. Still no signal. He opened the camera. Now? I asked. He nodded. This one deserves a picture. We squeezed into the frame together with the completed puzzle sitting on the table between us. Nathan held up the phone. Ready? I think so. He counted down. 3, 2. Just before he pressed the button, he looked at me. Not at the screen. At me. And smiled. A real smile. The kind that reached his eyes. The camera captured that instead. Afterward, he checked the photo. This is terrible. I laughed. My eyes are closed. No. He turned the screen toward me. The lighting's awful. I looked. Neither of us was looking at the camera. We were looking at each other. Neither of us said anything. Nathan quietly locked the phone. I'm keeping it anyway. That evening we cooked dinner together like always. Only this time we didn't rush. Music played softly from the old battery-powered radio whenever it managed to catch a station. Nathan chopped vegetables. I stirred soup. At one point our shoulders bumped as we reached for the same spoon. We both instinctively stepped back. Then looked at each other. Then laughed. We've become terrible at sharing kitchens, Nathan said. I think the kitchen shrank. Definitely. A few minutes later it happened again. This time neither of us moved immediately. The moment lasted maybe 2 seconds. Nothing happened. Then Nathan quietly continued cooking as if nothing unusual had occurred. But something had. Not outside. Inside me. That night we played another game of cards. Nathan won again. I'm starting to think you're cheating. I've simply evolved. Into what? A better card player. I don't think evolution works that fast. It does in remote cabins. The fire burned low. Outside, the moon reflected across untouched snow, making the entire mountain glow silver. Nathan looked toward the window. Come outside. It's freezing. I know. But trust me. I followed him. The cold hit immediately. Neither of us cared. The entire forest shimmered beneath moonlight. It almost looked like daylight. Nathan whispered without thinking. I don't think I've ever seen anything this beautiful. I wasn't looking at the mountains anymore. I was looking at him. The words escaped before I could stop them. Me either. Nathan slowly turned. Our eyes met. For one long second. Neither of us looked away. Then he smiled. Not because I'd said something romantic. Because he understood exactly what I'd meant. And because I suddenly realized. So did I. Neither of us mentioned it when we went back inside. We didn't need to. The atmosphere had changed. Not into something awkward. Into something more honest. Later that night I couldn't sleep. The cabin was silent except for the fire settling into glowing embers. I walked into the kitchen for a glass of water. Nathan was already there. Leaning against the counter. Apparently unable to sleep either. Couldn't rest? I asked. He shook his head. My mind's too loud. I filled my glass. Mine too. For a while either of us spoke. Then Nathan quietly asked, Can I tell you something without making things weird? I looked at him. You can try. He laughed softly. I don't remember the last time I met someone I could spend every hour with. He searched for the right words. Without feeling tired. I leaned against the opposite counter. I was thinking the same thing. His eyes lifted to mine. I've spent years protecting my time. So have I. And somehow. He smiled almost to himself. These days haven't felt long enough. The room became very quiet. Neither of us looked away. Nathan finally broke the silence. I'm glad your car kept working. I smiled. I'm glad yours didn't. He laughed. So am I. Neither of us moved for several seconds. Then, almost at the same moment, we both realized how close we were standing. Nathan took one small step backward. Not because he wanted distance. Because he was being careful. I appreciated that more than he probably realized. Good night, Zachary. Good night, Nathan. As he disappeared toward the bedroom, I remained in the kitchen a little longer. One thought kept repeating in my head. I had come to the mountains hoping to forget someone. Instead, I was beginning to wonder if I had just met someone I would never forget. The next morning, either of us mentioned the conversation in the kitchen. Not because we were pretending it hadn't happened. Because we didn't know what to do with it yet. Some feelings don't arrive all at once. They settle in slowly, quietly, until one day you realize they've been there for a while. We made breakfast together as usual. Nathan was making pancakes. Or attempting to. I think they're too thick. They're supposed to be thick. They're not supposed to look defensive. I laughed. They're pancakes, Nathan. They're fighting me. The first one came out looking almost circular. The second looked like a map of an imaginary country. By the fourth, he'd finally figured it out. He held up the spatula triumphantly. I've done it. You've cooked breakfast. I've conquered breakfast. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. He pointed the spatula at me. You underestimate how competitive I am. I've noticed. We ate by the window, watching sunlight sparkle across the snow. The storm felt like a distant memory now. The mountains were quiet. Peaceful. Almost welcoming. Nathan rested his mug in both hands. What do you think you'll do when we get back? I looked outside before answering. I honestly don't know. No plan? I had one before I came here. And now? It doesn't fit anymore. He nodded as though he'd expected that answer. My boss is going to ask why I didn't answer emails. What will you tell him? The truth. Which is? I couldn't. He smiled. Then he'll ask why I sound happier. I laughed. What will you tell him? Nathan looked into his coffee. I don't think I'll know how. That afternoon we decided to explore farther than before. The weather was perfect. Cold but calm. We packed water, snacks, and promised each other we wouldn't go beyond the line of tall pines visible from the cabin. If one of us disappears, Nathan said while pulling on his gloves, the other has to come looking. I was planning to leave dramatically mysterious footprints. Please don't. The forest felt different under clear skies. Sunlight filtered through snow-covered branches, throwing long shadows across the untouched ground. Every sound seemed sharper. The crunch beneath our boots. The distant call of a bird. Our own laughter. We walked for nearly an hour before reaching a frozen stream. Nathan stopped immediately. I didn't even know this was here. The water beneath the ice looked almost blue. We stood on the bank in silence. I used to do this with my dad, Nathan said unexpectedly. Walk in the woods? He nodded. When I was a kid. He'd point out animal tracks. I was terrible at finding them. He smiled at the memory. I always made up my own. What kind? Probably a snow dragon. I laughed. Did he believe you? No. But he'd always play along. His smile softened. I haven't thought about that in years. You miss him? Nathan nodded. He passed away when I was 22. I'm sorry. So am I. We remained there quietly. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It gave his memories room to exist. After a while, he looked at me. Your turn. My turn? Tell me something nobody knows. I thought for a long time, then admitted something I'd never actually said out loud. When my last relationship ended, Nathan listened without interrupting. I wasn't only scared of being alone. I looked down at the frozen stream. I was scared that maybe I wasn't someone people stayed with. The words surprised even me. I'd never admitted them before. Nathan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, not close enough to touch me, just close enough that I didn't feel alone with what I'd said. I don't think that's true. You don't know me very well. He smiled gently. I know enough. I looked at him. What do you know? He counted quietly on his fingers. You always make coffee before thinking about yourself. You laugh before other people finish telling stories because you're excited, not because you're impatient. You apologize when something isn't your fault. And, he hesitated, you make every place feel calmer than it was before you walked into it. I stared at him. Nobody had ever described me like that. Nobody had ever noticed those things. You've been paying attention. He looked almost embarrassed. I guess I have. We started walking back toward the cabin much more slowly. Neither of us seemed in a hurry anymore. Halfway home, Nathan suddenly stopped. What? He pointed toward the snow. Fresh tracks. Not ours. Animal tracks. Small. Probably a fox. We followed them for a few minutes until they disappeared into the trees. Nathan grinned like a little kid. My dad would have loved that. I'm glad we found them. So am I. When we reached the cabin, the sun had already started setting. Orange lights spilled across the mountains. Inside, the warmth greeted us immediately. Nathan took off his gloves. You know what's strange? What? This place felt tiny when we arrived. And now? He looked around. It somehow feels bigger. I knew exactly what he meant. It wasn't the cabin that had changed. It was us. That evening we found an old chess set. Neither of us was particularly good. I haven't played since college, Nathan admitted. I've never been good. Perfect. 2 hours later, the board looked like complete chaos. I don't think that's how bishops work, I said. Nathan frowned. They're doing their best. They're moving sideways. They're improvising. I laughed so hard I nearly knocked over my king. You're impossible. So I've been told. Eventually he won anyway. I refuse to believe this. I'm naturally gifted. You sacrificed half your pieces. A strategic decision. It definitely wasn't. He leaned back in his chair, smiling. I've missed laughing this much. The sentence slipped out casually. But it settled between us. So have I admitted. Night came quietly. The fire crackled. The wind had almost completely disappeared. Nathan stretched and stood. I think tomorrow they'll finally clear the road. I looked at him. I think so too. Neither of us sounded excited. He noticed. So, I guess this weird little world we've been living in. He looked around the cabin. Is almost over. I nodded slowly. It is. For the first time since the snowstorm had trapped us there. The silence between us didn't feel peaceful. It felt temporary. And somehow, that scared me more than the storm ever had. Neither of us slept well that night. It wasn't because anything was wrong. It was because we both knew something was about to end. The next morning, I woke to the unfamiliar sound of an engine. At first, I thought I was dreaming. Then I heard it again. Low. Distant. Nathan was already standing by the front window. He didn't turn around when I walked up beside him. I think they're clearing the road. I followed his gaze. Far below, barely visible through the trees, something yellow moved slowly across the white landscape. A snowplow. Either of us spoke. After nearly 2 weeks of wishing someone would come, the reality felt strangely disappointing. Nathan finally broke the silence. I thought I'd be happier. So did I. He smiled sadly. I guess humans are weird. We get attached. Even to being snowed in? I looked around the cabin. The mugs drying beside the sink. The unfinished novel on the armchair. The chessboard we'd forgotten to put away. The blanket Nathan always used in the evenings. I don't think it's the snow. He looked at me. I think it's everything else. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. By lunchtime, the sound of machinery was much closer. The weather radio finally came back to life. Major routes are beginning to reopen. Travelers should prepare for delays. Nathan quietly switched it off. Neither of us wanted updates anymore. Instead, we spent the afternoon exactly as we had every other day. We cooked together. Finished the last of the soup. Packed our bags. Though we packed far more slowly than necessary. Nathan folded the same sweater twice. Then unfolded it. Then folded it again. I noticed. You're procrastinating. So are you. I looked down. I'd been staring into an empty backpack for almost a minute. There. He laughed softly. I don't really want to leave. The honesty of it settled over the room. I know. I keep thinking. He sat down on the edge of the sofa. What if this never happened? I sat opposite him. It did. I know. But what happens when we go back? There it was. The question we'd both been avoiding. Real life. Work. Cities. Schedules. Distance. Nathan lived almost 3 hours away. I lived in the opposite direction. Different lives. Different routines. Different worlds. The cabin had hidden all of that from us. Tomorrow it wouldn't. I don't know, I admitted. He nodded slowly. I was hoping you'd have a better answer. So was I. We both smiled. Late that afternoon, we heard another engine. This time it stopped directly outside. Nathan looked at me. I guess. Yeah. We put on our coats. The front door opened much more easily now. Outside stood a heavy snowplow and a pickup truck. A middle-aged worker climbed down, smiling apologetically. You boys okay? Nathan and I exchanged a quick glance. Almost simultaneously we answered. Yeah. The man laughed. Took longer than expected. We figured. Road should be safe now. He looked toward Nathan's buried SUV. Might take another hour to dig that one out. No problem. It felt like one. While the workers cleared the vehicles, Nathan and I stood on the porch watching them. Neither of us said much. Words suddenly felt too small. An hour later both vehicles were finally free. The workers wished us a safe trip before driving away. Silence returned. Only now it felt completely different. Nathan looked at his SUV. Then at me. So. I guess this is it. I hated how final those words sounded. He walked over. Stopped a few feet away. I've never believed much in coincidence. I smiled faintly. And now? I'm reconsidering. The mountain breeze carried loose snow between us. I don't really know how to say goodbye, he admitted. I don't think I do either. He looked down for a second. Then back at me. So maybe. He hesitated. Don't say goodbye. My heart skipped. What do we say instead? Nathan smiled. See you soon. I held his gaze. See you soon. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Finally, Nathan stepped forward. He wrapped me in a brief, warm hug. Nothing dramatic. Nothing rushed. Just two people who understood that 14 unexpected days had quietly changed something neither of them had planned to change. When we stepped apart, he laughed softly. This would have been a very strange story to explain to people. No one's going to believe us. They'll think we're exaggerating. They definitely will. He opened the driver's door of his SUV, then paused. Zachary? Yeah? I'm really glad it was you. I smiled. So am I. He got in, started the engine. For a second, either of us drove away. Then he raised one hand through the window. I answered with my own. And slowly, our cars rolled in opposite directions. I watched him in my rearview mirror until the road curved through the trees. Then he was gone. The silence inside my car felt louder than the storm ever had. For the first time in 2 weeks, I was alone again. And somehow, the drive home felt longer than it had on the way up. Not because of the roads. The snowplows had done their job well enough, and traffic moved slowly but steadily through the mountains. It was the silence inside my car. For 2 weeks there had almost always been another voice nearby. Nathan asking what I wanted for breakfast. Nathan complaining about the puzzle. Nathan laughing because I'd somehow burned toast. Now every sound came from the engine. I reached for the radio. Turned it on. Listened for maybe 30 seconds. Then switched it back off. The quiet from the cabin had spoiled me. About 40 minutes into the drive, my phone exploded with notifications. Messages. Emails. Missed calls. Work reminders. It felt like the entire world had been waiting impatiently behind a locked door. I almost laughed. 2 weeks ago I would have answered everything immediately. Instead, I drove another hour before pulling into a rest area. Only then did I unlock my phone. The first message wasn't from work. It was from Nathan. Made it home. I stared at those 3 words longer than I probably should have. Then typed back. Me too. A second later another message arrived. The apartment feels weirdly quiet. I smiled before answering. Mine too. After that, nothing. Not because either of us wanted to stop talking. Because either of us knew what happened next. Were we friends? People who had survived an unusual experience together? Something else? None of those questions had easy answers. The first Monday back at work was a disaster. My inbox contained almost 400 unread emails. My manager wanted updates. Clients wanted revisions. 3 different meetings had somehow appeared on my calendar before lunch. By 2 in the afternoon my head hurt. I pushed away from the desk and looked out the apartment window. Concrete. Traffic. Apartment buildings. For the first time in years, the city looked exhausting. Not ugly. Just loud. I caught myself wondering what Nathan was doing. Probably sitting at his drafting table. Probably drinking too much coffee. Probably pretending he wasn't already missing the mountains too. The thought came so naturally that it startled me. I picked up my phone. Put it back down. Picked it up again. Finally I sent a message. Did your boss survive the explanation? 5 minutes later my phone buzzed. Barely. Another message followed immediately. He asked if I spent 2 weeks meditating. I laughed. What did you tell him? I said I spent 2 weeks learning how to make pancakes. That's technically false. True. I learned how not to make pancakes. I realized something then. Talking to Nathan still felt effortless. Even through a screen. The days settled into a rhythm. Work during daylight. Messages in the evening. Sometimes only a few. Sometimes dozens. We never planned it. It simply happened. One night he sent me a picture of a supermarket shelf. Hot chocolate. Underneath it he wrote, "No cinnamon this time." Another evening I sent him a photo of a half-finished puzzle I'd seen in a bookstore. His reply came instantly. Absolutely not. I'm still recovering. Those tiny conversations somehow became the best part of my day. I started noticing it. If something funny happened at work, my first thought became, I should tell Nathan. If I saw an interesting building, I wonder what he'd think about that design. If I cooked something that actually turned out edible, I bet he'd still criticize it. The strange part was, none of it felt forced. It felt normal. as though we'd been talking for years instead of weeks. About 10 days after leaving the cabin, I came home to find a small package outside my apartment door. No return address. Inside was a mug. Dark green. Exactly the same color as the old one I'd used every morning in the cabin. Tucked inside was a folded note. Your coffee looked wrong without this color. Nathan. I laughed so hard my neighbor looked out into the hallway. That evening I held the mug during our phone call. You actually mailed me a mug? I did. Why? You kept saying coffee tasted better in the cabin. It did. So I eliminated one variable. That's not how science works. I'm an architect. That's even worse. He laughed. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then Nathan asked quietly, Do you miss it? The cabin? Yeah. I looked at the green mug in my hands. I do. There was a short pause. I've been trying to figure out something, he admitted. What? I don't actually think I miss the cabin. I frowned. No? I think. He hesitated. I miss sharing my days with someone. The room suddenly felt very still. I didn't answer immediately. Not because I disagreed. Because I'd been thinking exactly the same thing. I know what you mean, I said softly. Neither of us realized it yet. But without ever discussing it. Without ever making any promises. We were slowly carrying a piece of that cabin back into our everyday lives. And somehow, it was beginning to feel like the beginning of something, not the end. Winter slowly disappeared. The mountains melted back into forests. The roads became ordinary again. Life returned to its usual pace. Somehow. Nathan and I didn't. Months passed. We never missed a week without seeing each other. Sometimes he'd drive to my city after work on a Friday evening. Sometimes I'd spend the weekend near his place. Neither of us ever asked, Are we dating? The question almost seemed unnecessary. Our lives had already begun fitting together naturally. One Saturday morning, while making breakfast in my apartment, Nathan opened one of my kitchen cabinets. He frowned. Where's the cinnamon? I looked up from the frying pan. I threw it away. He laughed so hard he had to lean against the counter. You actually did? I refuse to take unnecessary risks. I'm never escaping that, am I? Never. He smiled. I deserve that. Watching him laugh inside my apartment felt strangely familiar. Like he'd always belonged there. That realization should have scared me. Instead, it felt peaceful. Spring turned into summer. One evening we sat on my balcony watching the city lights come on one by one. Nathan had been unusually quiet. What are you thinking about? He looked out toward the skyline. Something funny. Tell me. I spent years believing I needed to meet someone extraordinary. I waited. Turns out. He smiled. I just needed someone I could happily do ordinary things with. I laughed softly. Grocery shopping? Exactly. Making coffee. Arguing over pancakes. Watching bad movies. He turned toward me. Living normal life. The simplicity of those words hit me harder than any dramatic confession could have. Because they were true. The cabin had been extraordinary. What came afterward? That was real life. And somehow, it was even better. Late that autumn, almost a year after the snowstorm, Nathan called me on a Wednesday afternoon. I have an idea. Should I be worried? Probably. What is it? Take Friday off. Why? You'll see. He refused to explain anything else. Friday morning he picked me up before sunrise. We drove north. Neither of us talked much. I recognized the road before he said anything. We're going back. He nodded. Just for the weekend. The mountains looked completely different without snow. The cabin looked smaller than I remembered. Almost ordinary. We unlocked the front door. The familiar scent of pine wood greeted us. Nathan laughed quietly. It somehow feels like coming home. I looked around. The fireplace. The bookshelf. The little kitchen. Nothing had changed. Everything had. The notebook still sat on the same shelf. Nathan picked it up. Our message was still there. Beneath it, someone had written a new reply. We were trapped here for 5 days. We read your note every evening. Thank you for reminding us to slow down. Neither of us spoke for a while. Eventually, Nathan closed the notebook. I like that. So do I. That night we sat outside on the porch wrapped in blankets. The sky was full of stars again. Just like the first time. Nathan looked upward. Funny. What? I spent months thinking the cabin changed my life. You don't think it did? He shook his head. No. It introduced me to the person who changed it. I turned toward him. He met my eyes. I've wanted to say something for a while. I smiled. I know. You do? I've wanted to say it too. He laughed nervously. So we're both terrible at timing. Apparently. The mountain was completely silent. Nathan took a slow breath. I love you. The words weren't dramatic. They weren't whispered like a movie scene. They sounded calm. Certain. Like something he'd known for a long time. I smiled before answering. I love you too. Neither of us rushed the moment. We simply sat there together, looking out across the mountains where our story had accidentally begun. People still ask us how we met. Nathan usually says, my car broke down. I usually add, the rental company made a mistake. People laugh. They think that's the whole story. It isn't. The real story is that 2 strangers arrived at a cabin believing they needed to escape the world. Instead, they found someone who made the world feel less exhausting. Sometimes life changes because of careful planning. Sometimes it changes because the forecast is wrong. Because a road disappears beneath snow. Because an engine refuses to start. Because 2 people who never should have met are given 14 unexpected days together. Looking back, I don't remember the cold first. Or the buried cars. Or even the storm. I remember coffee every morning. Cards by the fireplace. The impossible puzzle. Sunrises in complete silence. A green mug that still sits in my kitchen. And one simple sentence spoken on a mountain road before we drove away in opposite directions. See you soon. It turned out those 3 words weren't a goodbye. They were the beginning.